Hey, grade six. So last week we watched a video for the story of Hiawatha, and I just wanted to go through some extra information that you might have learned or might have missed when we were watching that video. So we learned a little bit about a character named Hiawatha, and he was from the Onondaga Nation, and he was pretty sad because they had been at war for so long, and he wanted to go and find a way to make peace. And he found out that the Mohawk Nation had actually been suggesting peace. So he traveled all the way to the Mohawk Nation to kind of just figure out how they could create the Haudenosaunee. And the Haudenosaunee is what they called themselves. So Haudenosaunee means people of the Longhouse. The name Iroquois is a name that was given to the nations and tribes that lived there, the Aboriginal people, by the French settlers that came later, and we still know them as the Iroquois today. So the Haudenosaunee is the name they gave to themselves, and it means people of the Longhouse. So they said that their territories kind of looked like a big longhouse, the way they were laid out, and it also meant that they were family, because that meant that they all lived in the same longhouse together, which is how the families were in the Iroquois Confederacy. So this is the territory here that they were all living in. Right in the middle was the Onondaga. Over here in the Eastern Territories was the Mohawk. Then in between the Onondaga and the Mohawk, we had the Oneida. Then we had Cayuga right next to Onondaga. And over on the western side, we had the Seneca. So this is kind of how their area was laid out. These were the original five nations, and the nations that ended up joining later on was the Tuscarora, which we'll talk about in a second. So a way to remember the five nations from west to east, I use the acronym SCOOM. So Seneca, Cayuga, Onondaga, Oneida, and the Mohawk. And that's just kind of a quick way to remember. Remember the Onondaga, they're pretty important. They're right in the middle of the rest of the nations. And again, we had our Tuscarora. So the Tuscarora Nation actually fell right here. And they ended up joining peace with the rest of them much later on in the 1700s. And the original nations had gotten together in the 1500s. And whenever they made decisions, the Tuscarora would just join the Oneida when they made those decisions. And they're found just right in that little territory. So some of the special jobs that they had, because the Seneca were on the far west of the territories, they had a really important job called being the keepers of the western door. And because the Mohawk were on the far east of their territories, they were the keepers of the eastern door. And their kind of big job, because they were on each of those ends, is whenever a nation wanted to come and wage war on them, so Seneca would be the first nation that would see people coming in from this side, and the Mohawk would be the first people to see people coming in from this side. And it was their job to make sure that they were offering peace to these nations a minimum of 3 times. So they'd say, okay, we'd like to have peace. And they'd say, no, I still want to wage war on you. Okay, no, I really think you should have peace with us. And they'd say, no, I still want to wage war with you. And by the 3rd time, if they were still saying, no, we definitely want to fight you, then they would get to call on the rest of the Iroquois Confederacy. So all the other nations would show up to fight that one person. So it would be very, very silly for other people to come up and say, yeah, I think I'm going to wage some war on this Seneca clan, because then they'd have everybody else come from different areas and wage war with them. So they were very, very strong together. Another really important job was the Onondaga. The Onondaga were known as the keepers of the council fire. So whenever they wanted to make really big decisions for the entire Iroquois, everybody would come to Onondaga territory. And that's where the council meetings would take place, because they were right in the middle. And that was also really convenient. The Seneca could come here, Cayuga would come in, Oneida could come, and Mohawk could come. And they would all end up in that Onondaga territory, and that's where the big council meetings would host. And the chiefs came from every nation to come and make any decisions that could affect the rest of the Iroquois Confederacy. When they were making those decisions, they always had the younger brothers discuss the issue first, and they would have to come to something called consensus. Our younger brothers were the Cayuga and the Oneida. If they could come to an agreement on a decision, then it would go next to the elder brothers. And our elder brothers were the Mohawk and the Seneca. Once everybody reached consensus, and consensus means that everybody has to agree to a decision before it can be passed, then they would pass it off to the final nation, which was the Onondaga. So you would have seen in the video last week that Tadadaho was given the final veto power. But in reality, because everybody has to agree to a decision for it to be passed in the first place, everyone kind of had veto power, because if even one person didn't agree, then that decision couldn't get passed. So once the elders discussed and agreed, and then the youngers discussed and agreed, and then the elders discussed and agreed, they would pass it off to the Onondaga, and they would have the final say in that decision making. So a veto is just the power to stop an official action, especially when you're making new laws. So at any point, if anybody didn't agree with what was being said in the Iroquois Confederacy, then nothing could happen. So last week, we also had a little bit of a quiz. So I just wanted to go through some of that information as well for you guys. So one of your questions was the name Iroquois. A lot of you said people of the Longhouse. I think you're getting confused with our Haudenosaunee, but the correct answer was that it was a name given to the Haudenosaunee by the French settlers. The Iroquois is a name that we gave them when we came to Canada. They called themselves the Haudenosaunee. Haudenosaunee means people of the Longhouse. And the reason, again, is because they kind of look like they're set up in a longhouse here, and all of them were family. From west to east, the original 5 nations can be remembered using the acronym SCOOM, and that was our Seneca, Cayuga, Onondaga, Oneida, and Mohawk. The last nation to join the Iroquois Confederacy was the Tuscarora in 1722. So the original 5 nations with the SCOOM, they had created that peace in the 1500s. So Tuscarora came much later on. Which character only listened to power? That was Tadadaho, and he was the character that was running, or the chief that was running the Onondaga territory when they were trying to create that big Great Law of Peace. What did Hiawatha bring the Mohawk to prove he wanted peace? He brought some wampum. So he had brought that wampum to the peacemaker to show that he really wanted peace and he wanted them to be connected. Jegonsase was so powerful because she was a clan mother. So I want to take this time to talk a little bit about clan mothers. So I remember when we were doing the ancient Athens ladies and things didn't look so good for girls in terms of making decisions. Well, this is your unit, okay? So women were considered very, very powerful in the Iroquois Confederacy. So clan mothers were the people that were in charge of their clan, and they got to make all the very big important decisions, including picking a chief. So chiefs got their jobs because clan mothers said they could have it. The most powerful person in that clan in the Iroquois was the clan mother. And if you remember from our first week, there were 9 animal clans. So we had 3 from the water, our eel, turtle, and beaver. We had 3 from the land, the bear clan, the wolf clan, and the deer clan. And then we also had 3 from the air. That was our snipe clan, heron clan, and hawk clan. So if you think about that chart that you were filling out that first week as well, if we look clan right here, that's kind of your extended family. Everybody that was in the same clan would be your family. And the clan mothers were in charge of everybody in that same clan. So one of the reasons that the women were so important to the Iroquois is because they gave birth to the next generation. So they were the reason that families could continue and generations could continue. So women were considered very, very powerful. The second reason that they really gave a lot of power to women in the Iroquois Confederacy is because women did all the farming in Iroquois and in that time. And so because they did the farming, it was said that they owned all of the food. So if they withheld the food from the rest of the clan, then the men would be in a lot of trouble. So because women also did all the farming and owned all the food, they were really, really important. And that's another reason they got power. To become a clan mother, you had to be related to the original clan mother. So that position is actually passed down to the next eldest female relative. That could be a sister, it could be a daughter, it could be a niece, any other female relative that is the next oldest. Whenever the chiefs all went to the council fire in the Onondaga territory, even though it was the chiefs that were going to make decisions, on the back of their chair, they had to have a little bit of wampum. And what that wampum actually said was, yes, you may be here representing your clan, but just keep in mind that that chair actually does belong to the clan mother, because that piece of wampum represented the clan mother. And that's another way that they said, yeah, boys, you can go and represent us, but keep in mind that the clan mother is the person who gives you your job in the first place. So if you're not representing the clan fairly while you're there at the council fire, then the clan mother can replace you with somebody else. Kind of like in our government, we give them their job, we can take it away. Which nation was the keeper of the council fire? That was our Onondaga. Which two nations were considered the younger brothers? The Cayuga and Oneida. And the reason that they were considered the younger brothers is they had lower populations in their territory, and they were also a little bit less powerful than the Mohawk and the Seneca. So because they were less powerful, they had buddied up with those stronger nations so that they were stronger if they were ever attacked. Okay, and we looked at this slide here with our younger brothers, the Oneida and Cayuga. When they came to consensus, and it would go to the elder brothers, the Mohawk and Seneca. Which nation was last to decide if decisions were passed? That was our Onondaga, and that was one of the ways that they had convinced Tadadaho to agree to peace in the first place. It made him feel really powerful that he was able to make the final decision. A treaty is an agreement between groups of people. The Haudenosaunee used wampum, or beads, to make treaties. After all of the nations agreed to the Great Law of Peace, they created a very important wampum. What was it called? And that was our Hiawatha Belt. The Hiawatha wampum had 2 white lines extending off the edges. This was the reason that the Tuscarora Nation joined Confederacy later on. What did these lines symbolize? So if we look at the wampum here, it has these lines here, and actually each of the shapes on the Hiawatha Belt represents one of our different nations. And they had extended these white lines off of the edge of the wampum, and that was a way of showing that even though they were all together in peace, they wanted to extend that peace outward, and they wanted other people to join. So that was actually one of the reasons that the Tuscarora joined later on. They said, yeah, I'd love to join in on that piece. It also made sense for them to join in with them because if you remember where they're located on the map, they're right smack dab in the middle of the rest of the group. So it made sense for them to join in for peace. Okay, so some of the big ideas I'd like you guys to take away from this lesson. The special jobs of some of our different nations. So the Onondaga were the keepers of the council fire. The Seneca were the keepers of the eastern door. And the Mohawk were the keepers of the western door. Some important things for decision making that you'll need to remember, and some vocabulary was consensus means that everyone has to agree before a decision can get passed. And when we're talking about veto power, that's the power to stop a decision from happening. And some of the very important people that you need to remember, the clan mothers, they were the most powerful in the clan, and that position gets passed down from elder relatives, and they actually give the job to the chiefs. And another way that we're going to be looking at a different word for saying chief is the Hoyana. So they refer to themselves as the Hoyana, and chiefs got their job because they were selected from the clan by the clan mother. Okay, and of course, wampum is really important. This is how they recorded their treaties. And wampum is just those purple and white beads. And the most important within the Iroquois Confederacy was the Hiawatha Belt. Okay. Hopefully that made a little bit more sense. Good luck on your quiz this week. Bye, guys.